Hello everyone. My name is Sarah Sutton. I'm the CEO of Environment and Culture Partners. We're a nonprofit based in Tacoma, Washington. This is Mount Tahoma, Tahoma behind me, also called Mount Rainier. And I work with Danielle Sikowski, who's our program manager. And then on this project, we have Misha Eagle from New Buildings Institute, also NBI, and Misha and her team, Webley and others have been the energy superpowers behind all of this work. And together with the support from New England Museum Association, which is our grant recipient from the Institute of Museum and Library Services for Culture Over Carbon, we've created the Carbon Inventory Project. And we've got a series of office hours, and today's version is to have Brendan Hall from EPA join us and talk to us about Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This progression you see here on the screen is the series of office hours we're offering as we move people through a process of joining Energy Star Portfolio Manager to create an account and to begin monitoring their energy, and to fill in all of their information from the calendar year 2022 to share with us to total or an energy and carbon emissions total for the cultural sector for 2022. This is our first year of work. We're being courageous, breaking new ground, and we realized that we might start with only a portion of the cultural sector but participating, but we like to think we'll grow to a much larger group. And we appreciate all that you've done to make time to join us today. We hope that you'll sign up and participate in this inventory project officially by sharing your data. There will be a link to that later. And as we work through all of these office hours, we'll approach different categories to help you understand how to enter your information confidently and to understand why we do this work and how it's going to benefit the entire cultural sector. It'll be good for you, it'll be good for the project, but it's really good for the entire cultural sector. So I'm going to I want to remind you that Misha is going to talk about what the next session will be about later on after we get through Brendan's presentation. But now I'll turn it over to Brendan to talk to us about Energy Star Portfolio Manager.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and just by way of introduction, I'm Brendan Hall. I'm a little bit of an odd duck to be on this webinar in a way, just because Energy Star doesn't have a museums lead, or hasn't historically. But anyway, I co-lead with the program our support to state and local governments. So all the voluntary and mandatory initiatives that state and local governments run, focused on building performance of existing buildings, be they like benchmarking requirements or competitions or the growing trend of mandatory building performance standards. And then I lead our higher education work, which does have some museum crossover, of course. So anyway, and very excited to be on the webinar today, or discussion. You know, I think there's a lot of reasons why museums make a great fit with our program, and I'll talk about those in a second. But just some background about Energy Star, in case you're not aware. So our program is an energy efficiency program at the US EPA, and we really exist to help the country reduce its carbon emissions. We're, you know, and here on this slide, I think we show the breakdown of total emissions in the country. About 45% of those come from commercial buildings and plants. So, you know, we can't get there without focusing on buildings, and museums, of course, are a significant component of that stock. All right, next slide, please. And here's where I got a little further into sort of why I see a great connection on museums and building performance. The first bullet is really, you know, true of any sector, any property type. By focusing on efficiency and energy performance, you'll increase your asset values and lower your operating costs. We have that adage, you can't manage what you don't measure, which I think is very true. It's the reason it's an adage, but that's not the only sort of benefit. Certainly, given museums are in many ways stewards that are sort of cultivating, public good, we see a lot of connection there around, there's not an Energy Star score or ability to earn Energy Star certification for the sector yet, but if there is, partly, through this work that Culture Over Carbon is leading, that opportunity, that would, seem like a great fit. Institutions could earn this certification, show to the public that they're good stewards in multiple ways. Another benefit is portfolio managers increasingly embedded in a lot of different, which portfolio manager is the main tool we have for benchmarking and tracking energy use, water use, and waste. And it's increasingly embedded in multiple different types of programs in the market. So you may have heard, the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of new opportunities sort of coming to play around electrification and energy efficiency in buildings. And we're expecting that at least some of those programs will require, if not, recommend the use of portfolio manager for tracking performance and sort of reporting through those initiatives. So in some ways, benchmarking in the tool will be a way to document performance and access those opportunities. And like I mentioned, so my role is sort of twofold with the program. It includes the state and local work, all of the state and local policies that require benchmarking across the country use Portfolio Manager for reporting. And it's also being used as a reporting tool for the building performance standards that require energy or greenhouse gas emissions performance. So the tool is very interconnected with a lot of different opportunities or initiatives. And yeah, the last bullet is really around how, we hope that if a score becomes available, it's definitely we like to think of it as the gold standard for comparing your performance against peers. And in that way, it really helps you understand how you're doing. And also, that creates a way to earn recognition for top performance. So we hope that by helping us, build out that survey data, you're also helping yourself ultimately in getting a meaningful metric and being able to earn certification. So next slide. I'm trying to keep it relatively light on the slides so we can have plenty of time for a Q&A and demo. So, so in case you aren't aware, the Energy Star score is sort of like it wraps a lot of things in that assessment of performance. So it takes your energy use, your gross floor area or square footage, and your property type, in this case museums, as well as a number of other things like weather, climate, and operating characteristics that are particular drivers of energy use for that property type. So each Energy Star score is different depending on the property type, and what data sort of provided by you will help us do is understand what are the drivers of energy use, and that's how we sort of create a model using that understanding. And as mentioned before, when you earn a 75 or higher on our 1/100 scale, that means you're a top performer and are eligible for Energy Star certification. So you can see the label on a building there in the picture. So, next slide. I didn't realize that this had animations. You can just click through all of them. But so anyway, this is sort of our process. First, we have to get nationally representative survey data for a sector or property type. I'm sorry if this feels a little boring, but I just want to sort of like open up the hood on what the process is for us to develop a score. We need that data to be unbiased, to represent sort of the full variety of buildings in that property type. Different climates, different weather patterns, different sizes and types. And then we do that sort of data analysis. We do a lot of runs of multiple regression analysis to try and identify what variables are sort of connected to performance. And they're operational. Sorry, I'm going to mince my words here. They're characteristics that a building. Oh boy, give me 1 second. I'm going to collect my thoughts. What we're trying to focus on is things that a building owner doesn't have control over in creating our score models. Because things that a building owner has control over are sort of like where you fall on the 1 to 100 scale. So it's creating adjustments. Someone asked like weather and occupancy. So that's an example. Yes, those are definitely baked into our approach. But another example is, I should have just given an example, is our K through 12 model. We found different performance if in high schools and in primary K through 12 schools. And so the model sort of segments out those two types in delivering a score. Obviously, that's not something that you as a building owner have control over. Sort of like, is this a high school or a middle school? But it is connected back to performance. So we're sort of like, in a way, creating an even playing field for those things that are drivers of performance that you don't have control over, so that what you're being compared on is what you're doing in the building. Okay, got through that. And after we sort of do our data analysis, we end up creating a model. And then we provide that through the tool. So when you put in your energy use for your building and attributes about the building, you're able to see where you fall on the scale by us sort of comparing your actual use and information about your building against an estimate. So that's the process. Next slide. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to Energy Star certified buildings. So they, being on that 1 to 100 scale, which is a percentile scale, they're more efficient than 75% of similar buildings. And they use, on average, 35% less energy and cause 35% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So it's both, an energy efficiency metric, energy performance metric, and a greenhouse gas emissions metric. So it's a great way to show leadership on carbon. Next slide. And a nice sort of side benefit is that the Energy Star label is recognized by more than 90% of Americans. So when you earn the Energy Star, when you have that label on your building, all the folks that come into your museum, they're able to, see that you're doing something positive. Next slide. I know you guys have previously done some sort of coverage of Energy Star Portfolio Manager, but I just wanted to remind you of some of its bullet points, and then I think I'll give a demo here in a minute. But Portfolio Manager is a free to use tool. Your data in the tool is private and secure, so we don't look at your data unless we're asked to. And we go extreme lengths to make sure your data is secure. So there's no sort of concern about confidential business information getting out. Like I said, you can track energy use, water use, and waste and materials, as well as emissions and costs. And ultimately, based on what information you enter, you can see, more than 1,000 metrics of performance. The Energy Star score is one of those, but it's not the only one. We actually see more growth in property types that can't get scores because there's a lot of value to benchmarking even without a score. And benchmarking in the tool, if you have a portfolio, you can sort of see how you're doing overall and, comparing between buildings. You can look at monthly trends in performance or compare to a 1-hour score if it's available or the national median if it isn't. And you can track the impact of strategies you take to try and improve your buildings. And then a couple of other things, functionality points. So the tool includes ways to share properties with other users. Let's say, you've hired a consultant to help on a project, or someone's managing your energy use in your building, or you're trying to sort of participate in an initiative like Culture Over Carbon or whatnot. There are ways to share your properties and data with other users. There's also a lot of built-in reporting functionality, so you can sort of see at a glance what you care about and quickly identify that stuff. And then through the tool, you also is where you apply for Energy Star certification. And then last point is the tool comes with a lot of available training materials and a help desk that has a bunch of FAQs, as well as the ability to ask questions over email when you can't sort something out. So you're not going it alone. I know you guys have a lot of help here through NBI and Culture Over Carbon to get your work done. Get this done if you're trying to benchmark. But we also have a lot of materials that should help you start from square one and get questions answered if they come up. We have I think we had over 280,000 buildings in the tool last year. So if you imagine all those folks running through similar sort of issues and having similar questions, we have a pretty good stock of FAQs and training materials that I think could help everyone out. Next slide. And then one particular thing that the Culture Over Carbon team raised for me is, there's some questions around, one, getting data into the tool, and two, sort of some definitional questions. So this first one, on energy data, what we need in Portfolio Manager to compute metrics is 12 full months or more of all the energy that your museum uses. And that would include delivered fuels as well as on-site generation if you had, say, solar or wind at your facility. And there are 4 main ways, well, sort of 3 main ways to get data into the tool and 2 versions of one of those. So the first 2 are what are known as web services solutions. So most benchmarking in Portfolio Manager is actually happening sort of not through the user interface. It's happening through software, different companies that offer software, and they're able to push and pull data into and out of Portfolio Manager. Push data and pull metrics, I should say. And 2 sort of versions of that. There are a growing number of utilities across the country that offer solutions for benchmarking. So, you have to put in some information about your building, but then the utility can push your consumption data automatically into the tool. So that map is one that's good to check out just to see if your utility offers a solution. The other one is companies, and there's a lot of them, but I linked to them, and that's, like I said, where most benchmarking actually happens is not through the user interface, but through these companies that offer benchmarking services, sometimes as part of a larger suite of energy management offerings. And then the two through the user interface are manual entry. So it's what it sounds like, typing in your information from bills that you have at your disposal, for example. And then if you're a large portfolio holder, or have a lot of data to get in, the last option is for bulk upload spreadsheets. They're a little trickier to use, but they're really intended for, if you're not working with a company, if your utility isn't offering a solution and you have a lot of data you're trying to benchmark, they offer sort of a stepwise series of spreadsheets to get a lot of data in quickly. So those are the ways in. And then beyond energy data, it's really other building characteristics or operations data, which of course is gross floor area. That's the key one. Most of our metrics are coming back to energy use and floor area, or water use and floor area. And then there are a few other details that are required for all property types, like year built and occupancy. And those ones aren't always even used in metrics. Year built, for example, isn't a part of any of our score models. It doesn't show, surprisingly, a clear trend with performance. But anyway, there are a few other metrics there. And then for property types that have 1/100 scores, those variables I mentioned earlier that are determinative of where you fall on the scale, we have asked folks to enter those in order to get a score. So those are only, so there's a gross floor area, a few other ones required for everyone, and then if there's a score available, there are some additional metrics for specific, or additional use details by specific property type. So that's that. And then there's a lot of information here, but I'll just quickly go through it so without reading everything off. This is the top bullet is part of our definition of what makes a museum a museum. There's some questions around like what should be included or excluded in gross floor area or square footage. And so this basically says, include everything. And that meets one of those sort of functional things. And then on the campus, if your museum is a campus with a lot of different structures, I'll say that's like a gray area. It's true in higher ed too. We don't have a score that covers higher education campuses. So there's some gray area around what should and shouldn't be included, but I would say go back to that definition in the first bullet, and if a space is serving, if the space is serving a function of the property type, then it should be included. So for example, if you had separate administrative or office space, that should be included when you're trying to calculate performance, because in another museum that's in a single structure. So in order to get things as fair as possible, we try to include everything that matters for that property type. If it was something that is a little less common or doesn't really fit the definition, then it could be broken out. Yeah, and then Portfolio Manager has functionality, and this might not be relevant for everyone, so I'll try not to go into it too far. But Portfolio Manager has functionality to do parent-child benchmarking. So if you had a lot of structures, you could input those individually, and then the data can roll up to a parent where you can see your total performance. So that functionality is in the tool. And and this include in GFA and don't include table is from an FAQ that we have in our help desk. So hopefully that's helpful in understanding sort of what makes the cut at a high level. All right, and last slide before I do the demo. Just want to mention a few things we have in the works or that are newer you might be interested in. So last year, Energy Star launched a new calculator called the Portfolio Manager Building Emissions Calculator. And that has two main functions. It's one, a way to calculate market-based emissions. So, there's two predominant ways to calculate emissions. One is location-based and one is market-based. And I'm sorry if this is remedial and everyone already knows this. Location-based is, you're just calculating, like for electricity use, where in the country your building falls and where you're using energy. The cleanness of the grid is how your electric emissions are being calculated. On a market-based approach, it's accounting for contractual instruments like the purchase of renewable energy credits in calculating emissions. So those emissions benefits can be off-site rather than on-site. And so anyway, this new calculator allows for market-based calculations of emissions, whereas Portfolio Manager currently only offers location-based calculations. So the World Resources Institute, the global protocol for sort of emissions, they offer those two ways that are both viable alternatives for calculating emissions. So we wanted to make a way for building owners to take that second approach. And the other thing that the emissions calculator does is emissions forecasting. So you can sort of play around with different sliders to understand what your emissions will be based on changes in fuel mix, energy use, and emissions factors. So, if you wanted to try and understand what it would take, for example, to get to, a 75% emissions reduction by 2050, you could sort of play around with those different sliders and see where that would leave you. Okay, a lot of talking about that bullet. If we go back 1 second. So the other few things here. So we also offer tenant space recognition. I don't know if any of you have sort of leased office space, for example, in commercial offices, but that's a new recognition that our program created. So it's not building level like most of our other recognition, but if you're leasing office space, you can earn recognition from EPA for what you're doing in that space. And we also offer recognition for new construction called Design to Earn the Energy Star. So two different sort of angles of recognition for what you're doing. And then last two here, we have a forthcoming tool called the Data Explorer, and that's going to be our first attempt at sort of opening up the data that's in Portfolio Manager, not in a way where anyone's performance can be identifiable. It'll all be sort of in aggregate, but you'll be able to filter for different things that you care about, like climate zone, property type, the core-based statistical area, CBSA, things like that, property size, in order to see how other buildings that are benchmarked in the tool are performing. So that tool is going to be coming out later this year. It could be interesting to sort of compare your performance before, say, an Energy Star score is available. And then the last one is we have a new proposal for what we're calling our next gen recognition. And this is, we've had Energy Star for a long time, focus on energy performance of the building, but this is sort of our 2.0, if you will, focus on decarbonization. So it includes 3 main components. You have to be able to earn Energy Star based on your energy efficiency. And then there's a direct emissions target by property type and a renewables requirement where at least 30% of your energy use has to be green power, and that can be offsite. So anyway, we have a comment period on that. We're excited to launch that recognition, hopefully later this year. So we're still finalizing what that will be, but it's sort of our, 2.0 version of Energy Star recognition at a building level focused on decarbonization. And that the screenshot here is from the emissions calculator. All right, I think I'm done now going through those bullets, and I can try and share my screen and just try and get people used to the tool real quick.
All right. I'm going to step in just for a sec so you can take a breath and get yourself set up without feeling like you have to rush. And I want to say that you guys are here at an extraordinary moment. Yes, the museum sector has waited until 2.0, almost 2.0, to get involved with Energy Star portfolio manager sufficiently. But you can see how this is the way things are going. It is a tool that we can use. It is going to be increasingly the common language throughout energy management across all sectors. And we want to be able to speak that language. And we want to be part of designing how it gets implemented so that it works with the way we run our buildings instead of being forced to comply with something that we don't have connections to. So we have a pretty awesome moment here to help work with Brendan, work with the organization to design what that benchmark is for museums, and to comment on the next gen version. This is not that we have to wait until the government tells us what we have to do. This truly is our chance to help shape that in a way that's good for both sides of the equation. So that's another reason why we appreciate you being here. And I appreciate this information from Brendan, because although I try and live and breathe this, those last 2 slides are all new stuff for me. And so we're really, really glad that we can be part of that. And we appreciate it, Brendan, that you've shared all that with us, even though it might feel like it's hard to drop all that data on us. We're glad to have it. Thanks.
No, yeah, I'm important point and important context for me, just like rattling off a lot of words. So yeah, very well received. So on the demo side, I just wanted to give a quick tutorial. So this is my portfolio manager account. If you're not familiar, there's portfolio manager has a tabular structure. So up top, there's sort of high level my portfolio where you can see everything at a glance, all your buildings. There's a sharing tab where you can connect with other users and share your properties with them. A reporting tab where you can run reports and respond to requests from others for data. And then a recognition tab where you apply for Energy Star certification. And those last 2 are ones that I have as a sort of program administrator, so not super relevant to folks. And I'll just open up a sample building, which these are, any user can add these sample buildings just from the home screen. I'll go back down here. There's in your manage portfolio box, there's the ability to add sample properties. And when you click on that, you can add a number of sample buildings, so they can be helpful just to get a sense of sort of what things look like and how data was entered. So anyway, at the building level, so I clicked on one of those buildings in my portfolio. There's a second set of tabs, and these are a summary one, where you can see, at a high level how you're performing based on metrics you select. Details about your building. This is stuff like gross floor area, the property type, other key use details for that building, stuff like that. And then the next 3 tabs are where you enter consumption data: energy, water, and waste. So those are all the same, really. You enter meters by whatever sort of resource type you're trying to track, and then within each meter, you enter sort of the consumption for that type. So again, those 3 are all pretty much the same, the consumption tabs. And then there's 2 last ones, a goals tab where you can set goals for your building. I'll mention that we're starting to build this tab out more, hoping to enhance it further, in part because of all these requirements and opportunities that are leveraging Portfolio Manager. So we're trying to make sure that the goals functionality in the tool helps building owners sort of like understand their against those different programs and what they want to do there. And then the design tab, which is for new construction and major renovation projects. It's where you can get that design score for the Energy Star recognition for new construction and major renovation. So sorry, that's it at a high level, and glad to answer any questions if folks have them about the tool. And I can also answer general questions if you want.
Thank you. So any questions about using the tool, maybe your particular case, if you've run into a glitch or you've learned something cool that you want to share with other folks, or questions about this process of working together to build a rating score for the cultural sector?
And I think there was a question in the chat just a little earlier that maybe we want to address from Michael. I think it was about the areas that a building maybe doesn't have control over. And I think the question was, is that like weather and occupancy?
Yeah, and I tried to address that on the fly. This was when I was stumbling through explaining what goes into.
And he was prompting you, yeah.
Yeah. What goes into an Energy Star score, and it is those things like weather and occupancy and other use details about the property that aren't in the building owner's control.
But when you were talking about that, you were talking about how some buildings are different. We've definitely found in Culture Over Carbon, we've broken it into 9 different types of museums because they have different types of demands. And so that will be factored into our calculations. And it's part of why we need critical mass of each of those types to be sharing data through the carbon inventory project. So bring along your zoo and aquarium friends and your open air history museum friends and your art museum friends in order to contribute.
Yeah, excuse me. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather and it's starting to show after speaking for a little bit. But yeah, so that's a perfect example, is that like, those different types in the cultural sector would have probably be broken out, because what's true in an aquarium is probably not going to be true in a museum in terms of relationship to energy performance. And then there might be other things about the property. And I was trying to dig out here. We have we have technical references for each Energy Star score out there. This is like an overall one, but so you can see how in each property type what we're adjusting for. That's probably overkill for this call, but just wanted to show you that those exist.
Brendan, I've got a question for you.
Please.
We had an interview with an institution that already is using a program called Energy Cap, and I know that it has some integration with Energy Star portfolio manager. Just wondering if you can speak to the folks who are already using some other software solution, and how to kind of get their data into portfolio manager easily. Yeah, if you have any thoughts about that or experience.
Yeah, I think the first recommendation would be to ask the company you're working with on whether they offer that service of porting over the data. It really depends from one to the other. I'll add in the chat, we have, this was what was linked to in the slide I mentioned about the different methods for getting the data in. This table has all of the different companies that exchange data with the tool. So if you're working with one of them, I know Energy Cap is on that. That they might be able to, well, they should be able to do it, and it's mostly a question of sort of like what it costs, and whether you're willing to do that. And I think for a lot of building owners, based on where we see benchmarking activity, it is worth it to them to go through their service provider to get the work done. Oh, I
You
think you're on
muted,
mute,
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
As Webley says, I was whispering. So if there isn't an Energy Star portfolio manager general question, is there a carbon inventory project question or a culture over anything else that we could deal with? We can let Brendan take a break, or he can stay with us and we can see if there are any other issues we can work with you on related to this.
Yeah, I'm glad to drop off and let you guys chat, and I'm always available as a resource if there are any questions or I can help in any way. But it's exciting to have Culture Over Carbon and New Buildings Institute sort of lead this effort for a score. So I really hope hope you all continue to participate, and we'll see. Hopefully there's a score that comes out of all this work. So
excellent. Thank you.
Of course.
You see, Liz is typing. Wanna go ahead, Liz?
Hey, yeah, I started to type and then I realized that it's going to take too long for me to type. We had a baseline. I'm work for Monticello, and we had an outside consultant do a baseline, and that's great. And now I'm sort of sitting on it, and I don't know what to do because I'd love to start budgeting for things you spoke about. If we did this, how much would it reduce our emissions by? So I could start to build a plan and put some numbers behind it and get people comfortable with this, being something we can do. Setting a reduction goal is what I mean. So our consultant used the EPA's SGEC tool. I think it's Excel based. I think I have all that data. They used that because at the time, and maybe now, the EPA portfolio manager isn't able to account for mobile fossil fuels and waste, and we wanted that to all go into our baseline. So essentially what I'm asking is there a way to convert the sort of snapshot of the baseline we did with 12 months of data, 12 months of bills, all of that, get it into the EPA portfolio manager so that then I can start using it in a way that's going to work for me?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think I had to look up the simplified GHG calculator you're referring to. That's I think our program is focused on buildings, so not transportation emissions.
Right.
But definitely, if you have bills for all your fuels, you can benchmark. You just need to add some core information about your building, and then go from there. And the calculator that I mentioned that allows you to sort of set set goals and do forecasting. Once you have your data in Portfolio Manager, you can push that over to the calculator to do that forecasting work. It's a
Okay.
seamless process. So yeah, so
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I
should be
mean, our
doable.
buildings are 73% of our total annual emissions. So, you know, that's where we should be focusing. So that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you're focusing on the whole thing too, though. You know, if we weren't in an ideal world, if we weren't stovepiped as federal government, it would make sense for us to have a whole program focused on everything, but it's just not how we work. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, thanks. It's really helpful.
Megan. Floor is yours, Megan. Mhm. I believe you're unmuted. There. Want to try again, Megan?
I know the double muting thing happens sometimes with
Yeah.
folks.
Does this work better? Can you hear me?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
good.
okay.
Thanks. Mhm.
Perfect. So this is probably a really simple question. I'm going to put in the chat the page that I'm looking at. I was having trouble interpreting the timeline schedule, specifically with the 12-month post end date report. So
Yep.
I understand it's going to be due 15 months after our project end date. Does the report start date column in that table mean like when the report will open to us? Or what does that mean?
Okay, I'm going to provide a little context for the rest of our listeners here.
Yep.
So Megan is a recipient of a Frankenthaler Climate Initiative grant, which uses Energy Star Portfolio Manager as a reporting tool, really a measuring tool, as part of that grant program. That is separate from Culture Over Carbon, although there's tons of crossover. So that's why Brendan's wondering why the 12 months is being brought up. And so what we've asked for reporting is that when you finish the work that you committed to in the grant, that's the beginning point for when you will measure your put in 12 months of data. And we give you those 3 extra months just to find the blessed bill, you know, receive it, find it, and finish all of your entry. That's just a grace period. But the 12 months is from when you determine your project is done. And then at any point when you're ready to report after 12 months in that 3-month grace period, you can go into the Flux account and drop in your report. Does that answer what you were asking?
What does the so in the table there's like a column at the top that says report start date, and it says the report start date is 6 months after the project end date, and the report end date is 12 months after the
Yeah.
project end date. That's where I don't know what these are referencing.
I think the 6-month was a leftover when there was a 6-month reporting, and that line needs to come out.
Oh,
That
okay.
sentence.
That clears it up for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's a web page glitch we have to fix, but thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And for those of you on the call, if you're a visual arts institution, if you don't know about Frankenthaler Climate Initiative, the grant period is currently open for clean energy and energy efficiency grants, and the due date is the 31st of March. And you can contact Danielle or Sarah about that. Anything or anyone else?
I'd just say that I appreciate being able to sit in on these, even if I'm not directly involved in this data collection. And it's good to hear about the comparison with museums with multiple structures to campuses, because that helps me think about what we need to do in terms of planning for more buildings within our complex to be, if we can, to have the energy use documented. Thanks.
You're welcome. Let's see, I think I saw a message. Do you mean the Frankenthaler, Michael? Frankenthaler Northeast? That's actually national. And actually Culture Over Carbon is nationwide as well.
Okay. Yeah, NEMA, I guess I was thinking that is mainly New England or the Northeast, so. But these resources are available nationwide.
Yeah. I had a question about that yesterday from folks in Cincinnati. They said we thought it was regional, and that's because of the NEBA webinar, probably. There was an assumption made. So, okay, you've connected some dots for me. No, all programs are national because it's a national issue, and there are 35,000 museums nationwide. We have a bead on all of them.
Cool. Very helpful. Thank you.
And Misha, would you like to talk to us about the next session coming up?
Yeah, so in March, we're going to be talking about delivered fuels and generated fuels. So for most people, that would be on-site solar. I know that we had a lot of questions in the Culture Over Carbon project about, especially solar. You have all of this different data, and how does it all work out? And how do you add it up to know if you're net zero or not? So we're going to definitely talk about that, as well as some of the things that we saw with delivered fuels and how you get those in Portfolio Manager. So if you have like propane deliveries or fuel oil, we recognize that can also be a challenge. So just trying to help out with that. If you have data that you don't quite understand, or you have specific questions, especially about getting that data into Portfolio Manager, definitely feel free to share that in advance if you would like, me to cover something in particular, or bring those questions to the session.
And Danielle has just so helpfully put the registration for the March 23rd session in there. That means that you get the link and that we know to wait for you to join us. And then, because she knows my brain perfectly, this is the link to the sign up if you'd like to participate in the carbon inventory project. So all of your energy reports will be due by the 1st of June, and all of this process is designed to support you on the path to sharing that material. So this link right here is the sign up for participating in the carbon inventory project. And if you have any questions about that, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, I think in May, either April or May, we've devoted that office hour to helping folks kind of tie up any loose ends related to participation. So it's really helpful if you sign up via this link now, so that we know we can keep you in the loop with communications, and especially for that particular office hours, we can be helpful.
Perfect. Thank you. And if any of you are attending the AAM conference, the NBI and Environment and Culture Partners teams will be there, and some participants in the carbon and Culture Over Carbon and carbon inventory projects will be there talking about presenting in 2 different sessions. So we'd love to see you there. And even if you can't attend, we hope you'll find us and we can say hello while we're in Denver. All right, just another moment. So we will lurk here, but if you need to move on with the rest of your day, please go ahead, and thank you very much for joining us.